and automobiles would be objects of proletarian demand. And that is what has happened. And for that, the market is the only available mechanism.
Another reason for disliking Marx. Now, let me ask you about George Bush. You were not a great fan of his predecessor. What do you think of George Bush?
Well, George Bush is bringing something that is not entirely new, but he certainly has a strong commitment to it, and that is to assume that almost any problem will lend itself to a really good speech. We've had the most wonderful example of that in the last week with the drug problem, which involves nothing new, and but did produce a really eloquent speech, and I understand the president's now going out and making some more of them.
Is it your view, then, that he hasn't done much?
I would not, on this program, want to make any partisan comment, but if you insist on the point, I'll agree.
How do you explain the fact that Ronald Reagan, who stood for most of the things you have opposed, left office with such popularity?
Oh, no question about that. Ronald Reagan was our first president in our great theatrical tradition, Hollywood. And he did a magnificent job of substituting the script for the reality. This is his lifetime commitment, his lifetime achievement. But now we're beginning to see in the S&L bailout and in HUD and the Pentagon scandals and of course, the continuing deficit and the problems of our central cities, the legacy of Ronald Reagan. We're beginning, in other words, to move from Ronald Reagan's wonderful script to the considerably sadder reality, a very serious point.
Did you anticipate a generation ago that complaining about the deficit would become a Democratic Party issue?
Yes, I'm a fiscal conservative when conservatism is required. There certainly are times when you want to expand the economy with an excess of, with a substantive contribution by the government to demand, and there are times when you want to put that into reverse. I would like to see the deficit substantially reduced.
We have a supply of excellent panelists here tonight, so I demand that they now ask you some questions.
Well, Professor, one of the big problems we've had in the past 20 years is Japan. They continue to dominate our markets. They buy our companies. Will that continue? Is there anything America can do to prevent this or slow it?
This is related, of course, to the deficit, isn't it? We're we have the two twin deficits, which in very large measure to go together, the budget deficit, high interest rates, the past effect of that on the strength of the dollar, and the resulting trade deficit. And I would think that the most important thing I've long felt the most important thing we need to do is put our own fiscal house in order. Now, beyond that, we have to recognize that there is a more fundamental development here. For the last 150 years, there has been certainly this tendency for labor-intensive manufacturing, mass manufacturing, to move from the old countries to the new. It moved from Europe to the United States, moved from the United States to Japan, and one can't go out to Japan now without seeing that it is moving now on to Korea, Taiwan, Malaysia. So that there is a broad movement there, which I'm forced to say we probably have to accept.
Professor Galbraith, Robert Heil...
I must say I dealt with him very well.
You did very well.
Yeah.
Called me off, right.
Robert Heilbroner, like you, a man of the left who can write, said recently that in the 75-year race between capitalism and socialism, that capitalism had finally won. Do you agree?
Well, I wouldn't put it in quite those terms. I would say that what has happened, and I feel very strongly about this, is that both socialism and capitalism have discovered that the old ideology, the old rigorous rules, do not hold. We have discovered that there are some things which must be done by the state, there are some steps that must be taken in the direction of greater social concerns. And the socialist countries have discovered, as I was instructing Lou just a little while ago, that socialism does not work for the diverse, changing consumers' goods economy. And that is the way I would put the discovery, rather than in terms of the conflict between structures. I think one has to go beyond that.
Professor, we've got the dollar very strong this week, and for some time now the central bank keep trying to calm the currency markets down, almost a throwback to the days of the gold standard. Is this a good idea, or should we all be going our own way and let the currency
I have very little confidence in what central banks can do. Among other things, if they buy dollars and have to sell them later, they lose money, and central banks don't like to do that, oddly enough. And the extent of central bank intervention is small quantitatively in relationship to the much larger influences of trade and capital movements that affect the dollar. So while I appreciate the delight which my fellow economists have in talking about that matter, I don't take it seriously.
Ken, we have less than a minute left. You have written acutely over the years about the instability of the stock market. We've had evidence of that fairly recently. But you, in fact, keep a large part of your own life savings there, do you not?
I think that's a good point to end on. The most important thing to know about the stock market is that theologically we must believe it is perfect. And in fact, there are large elements of lunacy there, and the recognition of lunacy is something which can be personally quite rewarding.
And you invest, one takes it for the longer term.
I invest on the assumption of market imperfection. But I leave much of my life accumulation, which is not all that great, to other people.
Thanks very much, John Kenneth Galbraith. A pleasure, as always, to hear from you. Hope you'll be back with us next week. Then my guest will be one of Wall Street's most influential analysts, Robert S. Solomon, Jr., who runs the stock research department at Solomon Brothers, and he's going to be giving us his forecast, which I assure you everybody's brother and sister will want to hear. Meanwhile, this has been Wall Street Week. I'm Louis Rukeyser. Good night.
Wall Street Week with Louis Rukeyser has been made possible by the financial support of viewers like you and by Prudential Bates Securities, the investment firm with rock-solid resources and market-wise thinking in the business of making money. For a printed transcript of this program, send $5 to Transcripts, Wall Street Week with Louis Rukeyser, Owings Mills, Maryland, 21117. That's $5 to Transcripts, Wall Street Week with Louis Rukeyser, Owings Mills, Maryland, 21117. Wall Street Week with Louis Rukeyser transcripts are also available to subscribers of the Dow Jones News Retrieval Service. Wall Street Week with Louis Rukeyser is produced by Maryland Public Television, which is solely responsible for its content.